Item number 16, discussion and possible action regarding the City of San Elizario procedures for contracting work out, in particular for City Marshal vehicles. Mr. Black.
So we kind of covered that already, the procedures. I was in the same vein of thinking there, like, if we have procedures, what are they? And if we don't have them, let's adopt them.
Okay.
So, there was just some concerns brought to me, and I just thought this was the best way to answer them. That way, there's no misinformation or anything out there. Do we have procedures for, I don't even know how much this costed, but do we have procedures in place?
So, yes, sir. So with regard to procurement, we do, can we put that up?
What's a resolution?
Mr. Solis?
So, Mr. Black, if you recall when they gave us the recommendations for the marshal's office, it was on there.
Okay.
So a lot of these things were on there. Just need to go back and review. I know it was a big chunk of procedures booklet that they gave us, but I recall it was on there. So
Right. So if you all look at the screen, or if you have the capacity to look at it before you, is that when you look at the procurement, it is a one-sheet procurement. And
Is this in the marshals?
So this is citywide.
Citywide.
So
Okay.
no department has an exclusive policy,
Right.
right? Because it has to be applied. And normally, when you look at procurement, the departments are bound to the policy, right? So that policy, like I mentioned earlier, is that it's also subject to any potential change that comes from the state.
And from the council.
Yeah, and the council. And so here, this policy was adopted back in 2017. So when we start looking at potential procurement, is that we try to understand what the value of that good is gonna be. And so when you look at this, one of the things that it mentions is that this policy exists because there's a state component
Right.
that says that if it's above 50,000 and above, then you shall follow this. So anything below that, then the municipality, the county, and et cetera, they are allowed to create their own policy. So when you look at this, and when we were doing our research, is that we look at the parameters of how it's gonna fall in. So I think if, can we go, yeah. So when you look at item, I think it's D1. So there it tells us that the purchase, less than 3,000, it has to be approved by the mayor, the city administrator, and the financial officer. Then when you look at number 2, the threshold goes from, 3,000 but less than 10,000. And then when you look at 3, if it exceeds 10,000, then it comes to the body, right? So one of the things that I see in this is complete vagueness. It just describes the threshold. It doesn't give us any further information. So for example, who do I call? How do I call? How do I communicate with them, and et cetera. So going back to the previous item, the idea is that we will look at this policy, and we would say, we would take an example of the city of El Paso, the city of Socorro, and et cetera, what the region does. So then we would come back and say, okay, well, these are the best practices as we understand them. So we would expand the items to say, we want to look at, yes, sir. We would expand this. Yes, we would expand that policy to say, we create the playbook, if you will. So for every item that we're looking at, we are gonna require, for the threshold, 3 quotes. The communication would go via email. We would create a vendors list, and et cetera. We would require for that vendor to be registered with the city, an example. So when we look at how we operate, it doesn't give us any guidance. So it is very different if somebody comes in and says, we want to open a business. Well, we know what those requirements are. And then if you want to have this type of business, for example, if you want to sell a type of good and it's bound by state regulation, like the TABC, then those things come into play. So again, that is very different from somebody opening up a business and then having a vendors list.
Can we as council add any suggestions?
Yes, sir.
I'm not talking about a suggestion as saying, hire that person or do this person, but I'm saying like,
On policy.
I'm saying we would like for you to, if you're gonna do something, start with local.
So the answer is that I have seen that. Now, there are some exemptions, right?
No, yeah, like.
Right,
there's
so
talking
you can't
the-
put that on federally or
Yeah.
even state, you know,
Yeah, 'cause you have to take bigger
funding.
bids.
Well, it's not about that, it's just that when it comes to federal and state dollars, they tend to have a wider opportunity, right? Because a lot of the state money is actually federal. And when the federal government, so for example, the MPO money we're gonna get. So we are required to put out, if you will, an RFP, RFQ, whatever the requirement is. If somebody from Alaska wants to bid on it, they have every right to do it. So we can't constrain that. Now, what the federal government does is that if there is a HUD business and et cetera, there are certain protected classes that they encourage to be part of that bid packet. So it does become a bit complicated based on the type of money that we're receiving. But for example, stuff that comes out of the general fund, we want to have somebody maintenance the park. So we can certainly build in that we have a preference for local vendors. No? Okay, there you go. See, so there's a correction.
Now, the state law does not allow for a preference on local. If they're small items and they're not governed by the state statute, then you can, so it's complicated. And this is one of the things where cities really get tripped up and where people do go to jail. So these are ones that we will watch really carefully as we go to change this. The other thing that to be very mindful of is you do not have a procurement department. You don't have anybody who does procurement. So this is the department heads doing their own. So it's pretty streamlined and simple, because to require them to do bidding all the time, anytime we put out an RFQ or an RFP, it's a big deal, and it takes a lot of staff time, et cetera. So I would just tell you that there's gonna be limitations to what we can do because of state law, and also we're moving into that, which is great, where we're gonna start getting funding from, when you get money from TxDOT, that's actually federal money, so it comes with a lot of strings attached. Fortunately, we have Mr. Medina, he knows all of those. And so we will know to keep all of that straight. But I think the most important thing for the discussion today is just really to understand what was done with regard to the procurement. That's what the citizens want to know, what was done. So I think maybe someone should answer that.
Yeah, so we'll have Mr. Solis.
Yes, Mr. Solis, please.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I wanted to know the other one.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So to better, I guess, answer your question, can you elaborate on what, as far as like the contracting work out?
How did you
Well, yeah.
procure that?
How did you choose? Were there bids set out? Is there, and as I was wondering if there's a certain limit to where it could be streamlined, or if it had to have bids? Like all these things, how do we choose? Do the businesses need to be registered? Do they need to be insured? Stuff like that.
Do you know what specifically you're talking about? Because we've done several stuff to the units.
Talking about the painting of the units.
Painting of
The
the
painting
units.
of the units, okay.
I'm
So,
sorry, yeah.
okay. Yeah, so because for certain stuff that we do with the units, it's very specific, and there's not a lot of vendors, right? So we don't have a lot of options as far as how to go by it, right? So since you all just looked at the policy, right, and it's very vague, right? So it leaves room for interpretation with no clear directives in the document. Unlike the SOP that you guys voted to adopt for the Marshal's office, which was much needed and appreciated, right? Because it serves as guidelines for the deputies and myself, and most importantly, enhances the transparency for the Marshal's office, right? And considering this SOP for purchase and the unclarity of it, I contacted my immediate supervisor, which is Mr. Medina, right, and Ms. Galcin, and sought guidance as far as how to go about the painting of the vehicles. So in accordance with the directive that I was given, I was to obtain 3 quotes and forward it to the executive staff. As instructed, I contacted the lowest bidder and proceeded with the project. I've also been informed that several departments in the city have also employed similar tactics. And in the past, no standard operating procedures were actually in place, which also could have been used as an example, right? So,
What was the amount? The amount that was paid for that contract? What was the amount?
it was less than 3,000.
Okay.
Do you have the?
He did a good job.
Okay, that's all. I just, because that's important. So
Right.
once we hit 50,000, then we're in bidding. But when we're in the lower areas, then they have discretion and do. And so Mr. Solis did what he's supposed to, talk to his supervisor, made the 3 phone calls, and selected the lowest bid, right?
So even though we don't have that policy being as vague as it is, there will still take steps that were taken to ensure we got a.
Yeah.
a-
So I
Extra
mean,
steps.
just going back, right, as law enforcement officers, I mean, I have to follow rules and regulations and directives. My job is really simple, right? Did a person commit a crime? I just meet the elements. If it meets the elements of a crime, we enforce the law. If it doesn't, we inform that there was no wrongdoing, right? And in these SOPs, there's no guidance. You know what I mean? So in order to not get in trouble, as Ms. Firth said, this is a quick way to get in trouble, right? Because we are kind of overreaching, and since there is no guidance, we just take it upon ourselves. Well, you know what? We're just going to do it this. So in efforts to not do that, we went about it, right? So I did contact 3 different, I guess you could say, companies, and I received 2 quotes back. The third one, I never responded, so I just turned in whatever I had. But going back to being able to use other examples and stuff, I'm just compelled to ask why it is that you chose to single out the marshal's office.
Oh, that was what was brought to me.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not- Yeah, it's not me singling out it. I'll question anybody. I think I've shown that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
the way that it was put on the agenda, right?
Oh, that was specifically what was asked about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And the only reason that I ask is just because since we are rebuilding the marshal's office, right, and you all adopted to give us an SOP for that transparency with the community, right? We're trying to rebuild that trust, trying to establish the new marshal's office. This could be misconstrued as maybe things weren't being done right. More specifically, that I'm not doing things right, since I am the head of the department and I am the one that makes these purchase requests. No one else in the department makes them, right?
The
So,
problem is that sorry to interrupt.
Can you speak up?
Yes.
a little?
The problem is that, unfortunately, right now, it's, excuse my French, it's stupid. We're walking in eggshells.
uh-huh.
We're walking in eggshells, and we need transparency, like you just said,
Mhm.
with everything. And we need to. That's why when he brought up the building the policies and all that,
Mhm.
awesome job. Like that, we can cover our backs, and we can cover anybody who has any questions. There they are, and we don't have nothing to hide.
Yes.
And that's the best thing, like you said.
Right.
If the crime's done, you do your job, and that's
Exactly.
your job. So you're doing the great job. Awesome. It's just the thing is that we're walking in eggshells.
Right, and I completely understand,
And
right?
that's
It's
why-
just, I'm not in the practice of airing out our dirty laundry. I could have easily been contacted, or Mr. Medina could have easily been contacted
Yeah.
to see what was actually happening. And this could have been handled in-house without it having to been public now that on open
No,
record, right?
but-
So my main concern is I don't want the community to have this misconception or
Oh, but
a
the-
misidea that we're doing things
Don't worry.
not right by the book, right? One thing that you will know by me is I'm very by the book. I don't like
Yeah.
going off, venturing off. That's the quickest way to get in trouble, right?
Yes, sir.
Like I said, my job is very simple. All I do is just read the crime. If it meets the elements, then we have something that somebody committed an offense. If they didn't, then we don't have anything. It's very black and white, right? There's no room for a gray, or I can't interpret the law the
And
way
you did-
I would like to
you did it
interpret
right.
it, right?
You did it right.
And that's my only concern, is that I don't want, since we are in the rebate, we're still in the rebuilding phase.
Yes.
I don't want that image to be put out to the community where there's a lack of trust, because first and foremost, I mean, the most important thing is the officer safety, right? And the last thing we want is for the community to have that type of perception, and then we get met with resistance, right? Because now they might not trust us, right? They think that we're untrustworthy or something like that. And then that puts us in harm's way, which that's within our job, right? That's something that's an inherent risk. We know that we might not go home at the end of the day.
Yes.
That's something that we choose to do day in and day out. And we don't need other stuff adding on to it, especially with the climate of law enforcement right now as
But at
it
the
is.
same time, we do have to answer to our constituents.
Exactly. I understand.
So if they have
I just-
questions,
Right.
we had to answer them.
Right, and Mr. Solis, the agenda is the safest way for me to put something out there,
Mhm.
and it's gonna clarify things. It's either gonna make us look bad or look good.
Mhm.
This looks good.
Yeah.
It looks like things were followed.
Yeah.
So that's my intention. I'm gonna continue to do my job that way.
Okay.
I mean, I did talk to Mike Medina about this before this, just so you know,
Okay.
and it wasn't completely clear about all things, and I have to be careful who I talk to in staff and all these things I've already been told.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, my hands are tied
Mhm.
as far as, when I have questions like this, it's good to air them out. Transparency is huge for me.
Yeah.
And this will get out there, and this is publicly recorded, and this is a good thing. So there's nothing that should be taken personal about any of this.
Okay.
I have a job to do, just like you do. And I actually wish more council would put things on the agenda about questions that come up. This is the best way to get it out. We encourage people to come to the meetings for what? So they could get this information. So,
Mhm.
and the climate of law enforcement and all that, I mean, we got repairs that need to happen. And
Yes.
so, and I think it'll happen this
Yes.
way. This is a safe way, it's a legal way, and hopefully it gets out there.
And you did a
So-
great job with those trucks. You did a great job. They look nice.
Well,
Huge
not us.
compliments on that.
The people that actually worked on it, right? So I mean, they did tremendous work on it.
Yeah, I've had good compliments on it from other places. They look really nice.
Awesome.
One last question, and just wasn't answered. Are they required to be registered?
So the policy, I mean, as you could read it, nowhere on there does it say that they have to have insurance or they have to be registered or nothing. I mean, it's
Okay.
that's very vague, right? So, because I mean, all it says is if it's less than 3,000, all I have to do is I just take it to my immediate supervisor,
So
right?
we don't verify businesses, we just kind of,
It doesn't say there to
Somebody-
verify a business, right? All it says is if it's less than 3,000, as far as my understanding, in the past, the practices were go
Right.
with him, right? And they never got any quotes. It was just
Yeah.
go with them. It's less than 3,000, right? So
Well,
to
but you know
avoid
what?
that,
I think we need to
Do we pick
be real
something off the
careful
street?
because it depends on what we're procuring. If
Right.
we're procuring something that we know is going to need to have insurance, et cetera, then when we're
Right.
putting out the request for information, it includes all of that. It's like, so I think you can't always, and the person that writes it, you can't write everything that's going to come up, you know.
Right.
So to some degree, you're going to have to rely on your management and the common sense of the people that are doing it.
Right.
So, say if we were procuring transportation, so we're going to get a bus to take some children to guess what? We're going to make sure they have insurance. We're going to make, so it just depends on what you're procuring. This was painting the vehicles. And we don't have a registration for businesses in the city. Registered where? What if it was not as, where? So,
yeah, those are the questions I'm wondering. Who do we even go to for this? Is it my neighbor? I mean, he does a good job too, type stuff.
yeah.
So
No.
I appreciate it, guys.
And I mean, I ventured out to try to get some quotes. You know what I mean? And just to be diverse, I mean, I got different people. You know what I mean? And I was just instructed, hey, go with the lowest one. So that's what I went. I
I
didn't
applaud you.
pick. I just got the quotes and
I applaud you
for
doing
the
that.
same
That's-
reason because I
That's
didn't
a
want.
step, that's a step that you didn't need to have to take
Yeah.
based on what we have on paper. And yes, okay, this is gonna go back to item 15 where Mr. Medina's gonna go back and look and update.
Right.
And possibly this will be updated, but I applaud you for taking the steps of going out and getting, whatever quotes were turned in. Cause I mean, I've done that before when I used to be with the fire department. I put out quotes for equipment and I put out 8 or 9 quotes, and guess what? I got 1 quote. So guess what?
He gets it.
who do I go with?
Right.
Yeah.
And I put out all these codes for materials,
Right.
and they gave me one, and it wasn't about, oh, they have to be certified, registered here and there. It's just, they have what we need. It's like tires on the cars. You know, you need tires on the cars, you're gonna go to Walmart, you're gonna go to Discount Tire, Martin Tire. You know, I'm pretty sure you're gonna go out and look and see, hey, who's gonna give me these brand of tires and who's got the best price? Cause you're not gonna go and say, okay, this one's got it for 500, this one's got it for 1,000.
Right.
Same tires, I'll go with the one with 1,000 when better off to go with 500.
Yeah, I don't
I
want to blow
think
my
just our
budget.
experiences are different. I've experienced something totally different in my work environment.
Yeah.
Where they have to be
So
insured.
you work
and
for a
they-
huge company.
Yes,
So
that's what I'm
the thing.
saying.
It's a
So,
multinational.
yeah, that's why I would ask these questions. So, yeah, I hope nobody in staff takes this personal, but it's
No.
important to me.
And it's
So,
and it's
thank you.
good that we're doing this because at the same time, now he knows that we have to do it. We have to
Right.
make policies so you can have somewhere to say, you know what, it says here, here and here and here. This is how I have to guide myself with that.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the easiest way to do it, right? And we
Yeah.
just stay out of trouble,
Yes, sir.
right? Just
Thank
follow the rules.
Yep.
No, thank you. Thank
Were you
so
gonna
much.
say something, Ms. Galcine?
Well, I mean, it just, Adriana Gausin, just for the clarity of things, again, I am going that extra mile when we're procuring for these things, for the best accounting practices. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I
Thank
know you
you.
have been doing that since day one, Adriana. You make me run into these walls. But thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
there's no action here.